Welcome back. Pop star Ed Sheeran is being taken to court in the US over allegations that his hit song Thinking Out Loud copied Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. This comes just 6 months after Sheeran was cleared of copying another one of his hit songs, Shape of You. The latest suit was filed by an asset company that part owns the Marvin Gaye song. Before we get an expert's view of this, let's take a listen.
From your cheeks, darling, I will be loving you till we're 70.
Well, earlier I spoke to Professor Joe Bennett in New York. He's a forensic musicologist at Berklee College of Music in the US. I began by asking for his assessment on how alike the two songs are. Professor Joe Bennett, tell me in really simple terms, what is the basic argument of this case?
The argument in the case is that in writing the song Thinking Out Loud, Ed Sheeran infringed the copyright of Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. And musically speaking, this is about a 2-bar section of music, that is the intro and the main chord loop, and the question of how similar they are.
Now, I'm no Simon Cowell, but when I listened to both of them, I initially didn't see any similarities. But if I picked out little tiny bits, I did hear similarities. What's your assessment of just how alike they are?
The songs are similar in the sense that they use the same notes with the same rhythmic values over a 2-bar bass line. But the level of similarity is not the only question in assessing whether copyright infringement or plagiarism took place. What is also important to assess is how original is the thing that is similar. So in this case, we're talking about a 2-bar bass line consisting of the notes 1, 3, 4, and 5 of the major scale, very simple building blocks of music in an ascending bass line. And just because those things are similar between the two songs, and there's no real question about that, you can create a side-by-side transcription and it's pretty obvious. The more interesting question to me as a musicologist is how original is the Marvin Gaye bassline idea. If it's unique to Let's Get It On, then it's likely that Ed Sheeran et al. Copied it. If, however, it's a commonplace bassline, then maybe it's just one of those things that musicians do.
Now, for those of us who don't even know what bars are, they don't really have a good sense of what notes are, give us a sense of what you mean.
Okay, I'm going to grab a guitar, if I may, to demonstrate. So in music, you have the top line, the melody, the vocal that we hear the singer sing, and you have the accompaniment, and you almost always have a bass instrument playing a single note line. In the case of Let's Get It On, it sounds like this. Those 4 notes. And although Ed Sheeran's song is in a different key, if you actually play it in the same key, the bass line of Thinking Out Loud is indeed the same. So when you line them up, yes, they're similar. But I don't think that's a particularly interesting observation unless you put it in the context of how many other songs exist that have that bass line. So because this case has been running for a number of years and I'm interested in music similarity from an academic point of view anyway, I've done some of the background research with some colleagues and actually found a whole bunch of songs that pre and post date Let's Get It On that have basically that same bass line.
So you can show us that, presumably, in quite a technical way.
Yes, so I can show you the results of our research into investigating the history of that bassline. So let me now just cut to a screen share, and I'm going to show you what I've got lined up here in software. Here what I've done is line up a whole bunch of songs that use this 2-bar bass line. And the other thing that I've done is I've digitally manipulated the audio so that everything plays back in the same key. In this case, the key of E flat major, which is the key of Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. And the reason I do that with these musical comparisons is it enables people to hear similarities and differences much more clearly. So when you listen to these, it's not about listening to the vocal or the instrumentation. It's all about that bass line, that dum, 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 dum. And we're trying to find out how unique it is. So starting with the person bringing the lawsuit, this is Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On, playing this 4-chord loop, 4-beat bass line.
I've been really trying, baby, trying to hold back this feeling for so long.
And here is Ed Sheeran's Thinking Out Loud.
When your legs don't work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet.
Let's just go back and compare like with like.
I've been really trying, baby.
Ed Sheeran.
When your legs don't work like they used to before.
So on the face of it, it seems pretty compelling when you hear them back to back in that way. But when you put them in context of other music, this is the song Wolves by Garth Brooks.
Marvin and his family stopped today to say goodbye.
And Garth Brooks likes that bass line so much he used it twice. This is his other song, Unanswered Prayer.
Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers.
Moving to a different artist, this is the Desert Rose Band and their song Pages of Life.
Now there's nothing left to say. There you go. You can have it your own way.
And the Beatles even got ahead of Marvin Gaye by recording You Know My Name, Look at My Number in the 1960s.
You know my name. You know my name.
And then to more recent history, this is Shania Twain with the same bass line in Still the One.
We might have took a long way. We knew we'd get there someday. They said, I bet they'll never make it, but you.
And my personal favorite, Lionel Richie's Stuck on You. I love this song.
Stuck on you. Got this feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't lose. Guess I'm on my way.
So in a copyright infringement case like this, the question is not so much how similar are the elements. The question, or at least one of the questions, is how protectable by copyright is the allegedly similar element? And you really have to answer both of those questions in a court of law to demonstrate that copyright infringement has occurred.
And I mean, is it your argument that essentially all music is derivative? People take things from previous music that they have loved. At what point, for example, you know, a classic like Let's Get It On, at what point is it a tribute to that music? Or at what point can you argue that it's some sort of musical or intellectual theft?
Well, I've always argued in my academic work that popular music is a constrained art form. You know, most songs are between 3 and 5 minutes in length. Most songs are between 70 and about 130 beats per minute. Most songs are in 4/4 time. Most songs are sung in the first person. Most songs rhyme. There are a bunch of expectations that we have of popular music that is what I refer to as the shape of the box in which all the creativity occurs. And that doesn't mean that pop songwriters are uncreative. far from it. In fact, the example I use in my teaching is that all oil paintings are rectangles pretty much, but no one sues anyone for infringing their copyright because they also used a rectangle for their oil painting. And pop songs have a lot of the same stuff going on. And sooner or later, an idea, in this case, a 4-note bass line, becomes so well loved, so well used by musicians that it kind of enters the category of commonplace elements. It appears in so many songs that it's really no one person's property. It just becomes part of the vocabulary that songwriters use.
I mean, nevertheless, this has happened to Ed Sheeran before. When he won his last case, he said he hoped it would be the end of what he called baseless future cases, which he says are damaging to the songwriting industry. Do you have any sympathy for that argument that if you are a songwriter, cases like this, the threats of being sued, leave you terrified?
I think it is very damaging, and these lawsuits, particularly the one you mentioned in the High Court in the UK against Sheeran, I thought it was musically spurious. There's a particular issue with these kind of cases when they're tried in the US, as this one is likely to be, because the US in music copyright infringement litigation often uses juries to decide the verdict. And juries, by definition, are randomly selected members of the public who may not have the musical expertise to be able to separate commonplace elements from copyright protectable elements. So they just go, sounds a bit similar to me, they must have copied it. But copying is, as in this case, only really one of the explanations for similarity that we hear. Popular music being a constrained art form.
So very, very briefly, if you would, for musicians who write music and want to protect it, how do they do that if court isn't that sort of area of last resort where these things can be tested?
I think for musicians, they just have to keep releasing work and make it as original as they can, and simply don't copy deliberately from other works. The challenge with cases like this is that music similarity, coincidental fragmentary similarity, like in this case, a bass line, a little bit of melody, it's much more common than people think. It happens coincidentally all the time in music. Whereas musicians actually deliberately copying fragments of melody from each other is very uncommon.
Professor Joe Bennett, it's been fascinating to talk to you. Thanks very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
We're back tomorrow at 5:15. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.